Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Handmade Arcade Town Hall. Let me get this. My name is Mia Hooper. I am the Director of Development at the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council and also the Vice President of Handmade Arcade's board. I'd like to welcome those here in the space with us and to everyone on Zoom. Welcome to joining us today for an exciting discussion. Before we get started, I wanted to just do a land acknowledgement. The Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council respectfully acknowledges that we operate on the traditional, ancestral, and stolen lands of many Native people in the Greater Pittsburgh region. The Adena, the Delaware, the Hopewell, the Iroquois, the Monongahela, the Osage, the Seneca, and the Shawnee stewarded this land throughout the generations. The process of knowing and acknowledging the land we stand on is a way of honoring and expressing gratitude for the ancestral people who were on this land before us. So again, thank you all for joining us, and I'm going to pass it off. Oh, sorry, let me do some housekeeping. For those who are joining us virtually, please leave yourself muted. Video is encouraged, but it is not required. Ask questions in the chat anytime. We will be sure to address urgent ones during the session, or we'll wait till the others and share it at the end. And come and go as you please. If you need to get up and walk around, need to eat snacks, I know it's dinner time, feel free to do so. No judgment here. For those also in the space, same thing. Feel free to go grab drinks, go grab snacks, move around, whatever you need to do to engage fully. There we go. And I'm going to pass it off to, which one? Tricia? I'm going to give it to Tricia.
Thanks, Mia. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I have notes, so I'm going to do my best to look at the screen, but I also have to look down a little bit. So who we are and what we do. I just wanted to give you a little information about me, Handmade Arcade's only full-time employee, the executive director. My first encounter with Handmade Arcade was in 2006 as a vendor. At the time, I was pregnant with my second daughter, who's about to turn 16. I was freelancing as a web developer and designer from home, and I started a maker business with some crafty moms from my play group. And we made baby bags, changing pads, little adorable tiny shoes, aprons, any kind of like kid stuff. It was really fun. And I really enjoyed it. And so then in 2010, when there was a call for volunteers for the planning committee, I answered it. I had experience doing events. I worked at WYP before I became a consultant. And so I joined the planning committee. And by 2005, I was part of the team that spearheaded Handmade Arcade's transition from a nonprofit from an LLC to a nonprofit. And by 2007, I was the executive director. So that's enough, more than enough about me. Let's talk about Handmade Arcade. So staying true to our mission is so critical that I'm just going to read it out loud to you. Handmade Arcade is a nonprofit organization that empowers makers of all ages by providing them with professional development and connections to customers. A lot of people associate us with only the holiday market, and for good reason. It's gigantic, right? But the reality is Handmade Arcade exists as a year-round organization. We start our year in January, we plan a spring show, we plan workshops throughout the year, we develop partnerships and much more, most of which we will cover tonight. So our history, this is going to be the highlights reel. Before anything else, I want to thank our founders, Jillian Chisnell, Kirsten Irving, Gloria Feruzan, Al Hoff, Jessica Manick, Julie Meredith, and Elizabeth Claire Prince. In 2004, while planning the region's first independent alternative craft market, these forward-thinking women put Pittsburgh on a path where small maker arts and crafts businesses are supported in ways now that no one could have imagined back then. I feel it's safe to say that Handmade Arcade has been a leader in the region's maker movement long before the maker movement term even existed. We held our first event in November of 2004 at Construction Junction with only 30 vendors and just over 1,000 attendees. And over the years, we held the holiday market at Construction Junction, the Hunt Armory, and eventually found our forever home at the David L. Lawrence Convention Center in 2011. In 2006, as the independent craft movement began to grow, Handmade Arcade saw a need to share ideas with folks who were organizing independent craft fairs from all over the world. So in 2007, we held our country's first ever craft congress right here in Pittsburgh. The event was geared specifically towards event planners and welcomed folks from all over the United States, Canada, one attendee from England, and a representative from a then unknown organization called Etsy. Many folks do not realize that Handmade Arcade existed for over 10 years as a volunteer-run LLC. Just enough money was made to prepare for the next year's event. It was not until we celebrated our 10-year anniversary did we begin to understand our impact in the region. That year, we hosted several popular free teaching workshops. And it was during this pivotal time we decided to explore new avenues of growth. We realized for Handmade Arcade, growth meant a serious assessment of where we came from and where we wanted to go. In 2017, we transitioned to a nonprofit, and the rest, as they say, is history. So what do? We organize maker markets. As I mentioned earlier, Handmade Arcade is a year-round organization. You may be asking yourself what we do besides hosting the region's largest and best holiday market. The annual holiday market is not only the largest and most well-attended, but we consistently receive rave reviews from our maker community and attendees. In 2022, we returned to pre-pandemic proportions with 250 vendors, 15 hands-on activities and demonstrations, and for the first time, we had over 11,000 attendees. Makers who participate repeatedly tell us that it is the best market they do during the holiday season, citing high sales numbers and the return on investment of being seen and able to interact with such large crowds. We support makers with detailed communications, which is super important for an event this size, and pre-event workshops. And makers tell us again and again that being a part of the holiday market is critical for their success. In 2019, we added the spring market, specifically for new and emerging makers who have never sold their wares at any Handmade Arcade market before. We are paying homage to our roots by having this event at Construction Junction, where we started. We have 30 makers, and the accepted makers attend workshops to help them get ready for in-person sales. And we also cover business basics such as business insurance, collecting payments, creating social media content, and connecting with customers. And every year we participate in the larger arts and maker community in a variety of ways, from partnerships with the Creative Business Accelerator and the Downtown Pittsburgh Partnership to host outdoor pop-up night markets, to being part of events like gallery crawls, remake learning days and initiatives, to sitting on panel discussions about the state of craft. We're open to being a part of events that support the maker community and welcome collaborations. So what else do? We offer professional development. In 2006, we piloted our Youth Maker Accelerator program with 2 students, and now we host over 20 Youth Maker tables. There are 2 components to our Youth Maker Accelerator. The first is for individual youth makers, ages 13 to 19. Those makers apply and are accepted into the program in late summer. They participate in 3 educational workshops where we cover everything they need to know to get ready to sell at the big event. And they receive money for materials for their products and wares, and are assigned mentors from the maker community. The program doesn't end with the market. We follow up after the event, share other sales opportunities, and support them as they continue down their path of entrepreneurship. Several youth makers are now regular returning members of our makers at our holiday event. The second component includes hosting 10 maker classrooms through our collaboration with, this is where my speech impediment from childhood is going to get me, Real World Scholars Ed Corps program. The students in these classrooms gain real world sales experience at a high profile event. It's a unique opportunity that they wouldn't have if we didn't have this programming. And so Handmade Arcade, we have a maker curriculum. It's ever changing and a growing part of our yearly programming. Regular workshops include Craft Fair 101 from applications to event day, booth display and setup, and pre-event workshops for both the spring and holiday market. During the pandemic, we quickly developed an 11-week maker curriculum in partnership with the Creative Business Accelerator that helped makers pivot from in-person to virtual sales. And as the needs of the maker community change, so does our maker curriculum. Earlier today, we launched a free 6-week workshop series in partnership with the University of Pittsburgh Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence's Panther Lab Works. It's going to cover defining success, planning for growth, engaging online, engaging in person, production, and next steps. There'll be panel discussions and informative presentations. If you're interested in signing up, it's limited space. It's for newer makers. It's geared towards newer makers who've only been in business a few years, and you can do it on our website. And we promote makers. I think the numbers on these slides speaks for themselves. We have a pretty big following, and we use our platform to promote makers. We tag makers when we use their product or their image in our posts. We highlight as many makers as possible on social media, our blog, and in our emails. And we're mindful of who we've already promoted to make sure we're always highlighting new makers. During the pandemic, in a bid to help makers with visibility and sales, we created maker takeover days, where we handed over the login to our social media accounts and let makers promote their business in their own words to our audience. Makers reported that was really helpful for them to keep their business in the public eye. And we've repeated that a couple times since. And we're also constantly pushing the boundaries of our marketing events with a limited budget. Our media ads have high click-through rates, which have resulted in, we had over 26,000 users come to the virtual catalog that we put up for the 2022 event, which is lots of people seeing lots of makers here from Pittsburgh. And we make creative connections. We've always had make and take activities at our events. We have had screen printing, button and collage making. And in 2011, when we moved to the convention center, there was more room to think more, to think bigger about this area. So we developed a specialized hands-on activity area. We expanded on the idea of bridging the gap between creatives and consumers. And we curate this area specifically for 3 goals: to encourage attendees to make, to get their hands dirty, and to leave the event with something cool they made, or the memory of an experience like watching live glass blowing, fiber being turned into yarn, or hot molten metal being pounded into art. Second goal is to showcase other nonprofits, maker spaces, artists, and collaboratives who bring their craft to our event and share it with our attendees on a large scale platform. The list on this slide really only shows a fraction of the people who have been at our event doing hands-on activities. And finally, and I think most importantly, the hands-on handmade activity area is to inspire the next generation of crafters to start making. Over the years, I can't tell you how many people who have told me that they took a class, started a project, or even a crafty business after being inspired at the hands-on handmade area. This slide's just some of our partners that we really want to take a minute to acknowledge. The Pittsburgh Glass Center has been part of the holiday market for years with their mobile glass blowing unit. And in 2022, they held their holiday glass sale at Handmade Arcade rather than have it at their facility, because the foot traffic is just so high at the event. And it went so well that we had a handshake deal by the end of the night to do it again in 2023. The Downtown Pittsburgh Partnership has been incredibly supportive of us, giving us free space to host pop-up outdoor markets and support from their team. And the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, quite honestly, is the reason we're here tonight as a nonprofit. With their support over the years, it not only includes grant giving, but they are the folks who guided us through the transition from being an LLC to becoming a nonprofit, which took about 2 years. And in the end, it was well over 100 pages of paperwork that was sent in to the federal government. They participate in our holiday market with their framers market. They promote our events, provide business support, and so much more. New to this list is Panther Labworks. Like I mentioned, we're starting a free series with them, workshop. We're excited to work with them, and we're hoping that this collaboration allows us to continue to expand our maker education. Origins is a group that seeks to grow connections among Black entrepreneurs in Western Pennsylvania. In 2021, we hosted a virtual market for the Origins makers that coincided with the slow return to in-person markets, and many Origin makers participate in our events yearly. The Creative Business Accelerator and Handmade Arcade are natural partners, and we complement each other well. They're a longtime sponsor, and we often team up to support makers, from virtual meetings to workshops to event day support. We really like working with the folks at the CBA. And Proto Haven, since it was founded, has been a great partner, from allowing us to use their space for meetings and workshops to being a part of our hands-on activities, and to supporting their many makers who participate in our event. And finally, Construction Junction holds a special place in our heart. They hosted our first ever market. Now they are host to our annual spring market. They allow us to use their back classroom for some of our workshops that we have with the youth makers and new maker meetings. And we just love working with them, and we look forward to many more years of collaboration. It's my last slide. So our impact. These numbers speak for themselves. Over the course of the last 18 years, we have counted it up. We have, and these are not exaggerated numbers because I wouldn't be allowed to make these numbers an exaggeration by the folks who hold me accountable. We have hosted over 3,000 makers, artists, and craftspeople at our markets, workshops, and outreach events. In our markets, we have welcomed over 130,000 shoppers. And in 2016, we started asking makers to self-report their income, and we have calculated that over $2 million has been spent on local makers at Handmade Arcade events. And the important thing about that to note is that we don't take any money from the makers. We don't take any of their profits. We don't ask them for a percentage of their sales. They pay a fee to participate, and then that is that. And then we bring the crowds. We've had 58 individual youth makers, and then these 25 entrepreneurial classrooms and the 10 schools featured in our hands-on activity area. These are important numbers because when you have a classroom or a school classroom coming to do a hands-on activity, that's not just one student. That's anywhere from 10 to 25 students that's impacting. So the reach that we have had with our youth maker programming is far beyond than these numbers on the slide can show. And up to 75% of some of our makers' annual revenue comes from our holiday market. It is an important event. We have a long history in the city, and we are, happy to be a part of the maker community. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jackie Baker, our board president, to talk more about our strategic plan.
So fancy, without further ado. Hello. To catch you up, we're at GPAC, an offices downtown, with a small but energetic crowd who probably had a hard time finding their way in here. So thank you for your patience with us, online crowd, while we tried to get our act together. We're really great at tables with a bunch of crafts in front of it. Not so great on Zoom. So thanks. I'm Jackie. I am the board president. Indeed, I came to Handmade Arcade in 2017 because I saw an open call for board members online. It was a meet and greet that said, hey, come learn about the organization and be a board member. And that was surprising to me because the process of finding your next board member is usually a sort of private and strangely weird one that isn't publicized. So I was very curious. When I showed up, they had me make my own name tag with crafts, which I loved. And they shared out about the organization and where they were headed and said that their founders were on their board and they had been working for a very long time and wanted some new blood, including the president role. So I like young nonprofits and I raised my hand to be president. So at the end of 2017, I met them for the first time outside of the market. And in 2018, I became president and I've been that ever since. All right. So I'm here to share our strategic plan. Here's a look at that timeline that Tricia shared earlier. As she said, for over a decade, Handmade Arcade operated as a for-profit organization, and we survived solely on the proceeds of our one-time-a-year holiday market, which meant sometimes Tricia got paid, and sometimes she didn't, and it was never, ever close to enough. In 2017, we elected to restructure as a nonprofit. Just a few short years later, the pandemic hit and threatened the one and only profit-bearing event that we had.
Can you speak up just a bit?
Yes, absolutely. I'm being asked to speak up. Yes, thank you. Sorry, because my face is down here.
Yeah, sorry.
Also, put in the chat anything that you need, please. All right, so we became a nonprofit in 2017, and 3 years later, boom, pandemic. At the same time, the Black Lives Matter movement called the nation to examine its white-led organizations, of which we are one, and to examine its gatekeepers and decision makers. So like so many other arts nonprofits over the past 2 years, we've been examining our role in the creative economy and trying to figure out how to grow so that we can better meet the needs of our community. We asked our makers in 2020 what role Handmade Arcade plays in their lives and how we could improve. Some of them told us that the market provides as much as 75% of their annual revenue. Some told us that Handmade Arcade's historically white gatekeeping had led them to stop pursuing opportunities with us. Some said that our staff capacity was not adequate compared to the level of consistent annual programming and professional development that the maker community needs from us. So for the last 2 years, we've been working to address those constructive responses, and they served as a foundation for our very first strategic plan. The question that we're trying to answer is, what do we need to do in order to grow and to grow well? Often the process of strategic planning is also strange and internal and weirdly private. Outside of some early interviews and surveys, sometimes the public can't access the plan or easily learn about how it came together or what progress against it the organization has made. So it's important to us to share ours and tell you how it came to be and where we stand with it. That's our purpose tonight. And we want to ask you what you think of it and what you want to see from us as we grow. Our plan was made with these two folks right here from Washington Consulting Group. That's Sheila Washington and Diane Ford. And it was made thanks to the Arts Equity Reimagined Fund, without whom we could not have a strategic plan. Our process included an environmental scan, interviews and surveys about our strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses, aspirations. And the decision makers in that process were Tricia, who you just saw, our board, and our advisory committee. You might be wondering who those folks are, and that's an excellent question. Here's our board. I know I'm biased, but I think they're pretty great. You're looking at 11 people with a variety of lived experiences and perspectives and some serious skills. We have the director of development at DPAC. We have a certified public accountant as our treasurer. We have an expert in large-scale public events, legal perspective, active working makers, nonprofit experts, and all of them have really big hearts for what we do. The people that you're looking at here really believe in the power of making, and they donate hours and hours of their time every year to support it. Here's a list of some of the skill areas that's represented by our board. Like many small nonprofits, we're a working board. We aren't a group of people who sit back and write big checks and read reports out loud at meetings. Those boards have their place, but not at Handmade Arcade, not now. We're active participants in the organization. We're doing the work of young nonprofit boards. We're creating systems and processes, transition plans, trying to build capacity. You'll see us at events. You may have seen me running air traffic control as you came up the escalator at the convention center. That was me. Hi. Here's a look at our current board composition. We think it's important to share this information so you know who is behind the strategic plan, who's responsible for supporting Tricia and leading Handmade Arcade sustainability. Reporting on our board composition isn't just about answering the question of who's in the room for decision making, but asking who isn't. We capture this data to inform ourselves and others about who has power and how that power is or isn't well distributed. If you've ever wondered who makes the decisions about who gets into our spring and holiday markets, here's that answer. This is our advisory committee. To make the decisions about who gets into the spring market, and for the holiday market, we also add 5 additional rotating guest jurors every year. You'll notice that almost every single one of these committee members is a maker, and many of them hold dual roles. We included our advisory committee in our strategic planning process because we want to ensure that we were including the perspective of makers. These folks know firsthand the community we serve with our markets. The first step of any good strategic planning process is to affirm or revise the mission, vision, and values of the organization. In our case, we really needed to revise our mission statement, which is Handmade Arcade empowers makers of all ages by providing them with professional development and connections to customers. It's why we do what we do and why we exist. Our vision is where we're headed and why. And that's because we envision an inclusive, artistic community where makers are empowered to share their craft and achieve their creative potential and financial goals. Finally, our values are what guide our decision-making, ideally in all things: anti-racism, collaboration, equity, financial sustainability, and transparency. It's that value of transparency that initiated tonight's town hall, because we want to report out on what we're working on and how. So we've chosen 5 guiding initiatives for our first strategic plan. All are aimed at strengthening our organization so that we can grow to better meet the needs of our community's makers. Initiative 1, increase organizational support and sustainability. We just became a nonprofit. I mean, really. So we don't have a lot of the things that you need in order to be around long-term. We don't have a job description for Tricia. We don't have a performance review in place for her. We don't have a leadership succession plan. If Tricia hits the lottery tonight, I don't know how we're going to get that market up. We have to figure out what we're going to do about that. We have to have these things in place because we need to take care of our one and only staff member before we can invest in more. And that's the plan. We know that we need to grow our staff in order to grow our capacity and provide the consistent level of annual programming and professional development that makers say they want from us. So initiative 1, first, we're going to take care of Tricia. Then Tricia's going to hire more staff so we can do more stuff. Initiative 2, determine an ideal size and composition for the board of directors. We've been working hard at changing the composition of our board, knowing that an organization's power lies with its decision makers, and it's our job to be mindful of who those people are. So we currently have those 11 members you saw. As we continue to have both natural and unexpected board turnover while the organization grows, we want to commit to writing what our ideal range of sizes, and what skills and lived experiences are critical to steering HA through its growth phase. Initiative 3, grow contributed income. As we said in our history and timeline, HA was a for-profit LLC for many years. We've got earned income on lock. We didn't become a nonprofit until 2017, so we're just starting to get that fundraising engine going. And if you've been a long time attendee, you've made notice that we started to put out donation boxes. We've asked for money more often. We now offer an option to give a donation with your registration. And by the way, if you registered for tonight's event, hello people in the room, if you registered for tonight's event and you donated, thanks. Like, thanks a lot. I looked at all your names and all your donations, and every amount really matters. We have a really big audience, and if everybody could just give a couple bucks, it would make a huge difference for us being able to grow. So thank you. We're just at a place where we just can't grow our programs and help more makers without growing our staff. And our investment in staff has to be supported by contributed income. If we have that, we can make more programs. And with more programs, we can make more revenue on our own. Plus, in a year like 2020, we simply could not have survived without the generosity of funders, specifically the Richard King Mellon Foundation, which made it possible for us to take our entire marketplace online and salvage what we could for makers' revenues. In a year like that, we felt the weight of not having diverse streams of revenue, which means our makers felt it too. We have a responsibility to do more here, so we're making it a major priority as we grow. Number 4, evaluate the effectiveness and efficiency of our current programs and services. We can't grow contributed income without being able to make a clear case for support for growth. We've already started this work, which is why we know that our holiday market has generated $2 million in revenue for makers since 2016, and that some of our makers earn as much as 75% of their annual revenue from us. So when we ask about what's working for you and what's not, I would really love for you to tell us. Write us, give us feedback. When we issue surveys, please take them. Tell us what's working so we can tell our funders. Initiative 5. Diversify the makers, attendees, and contractors that participate in all programs and services. We cited anti-racism and equity as 2 of our values at Handmade Arcade. So often, equity is about money. Handmade Arcade exists to connect consumers with makers, so decisions that are made about who gets to be in the market, or who gets a paid role on staff, or who gets to be a contractor, these are issues of equity. We're publicly committing here to not just pay attention to who comes to our markets, but who tables at the markets, who gets paid to check you in, who takes photographs, and to ensure that the folks we're giving opportunities to represent many in the maker community and not just a few. I'm a nonprofit nerd, so I had to put a slide in here with an organizational life cycle. Please forgive me. You're looking at an organizational life cycle. This one is from the Academy to Innovate. You see the birth event, then a growth stage, a maturity stage, decline stage, and renewal. We're between birth and growth, and it's a really exciting time. You may have attended this town hall thinking we'd announce big programming ideas for the future, like more markets and more classes, or how we can offer feedback on applications to every single person who doesn't get admitted. We would really love to do that. We would love to do more. But first, we have to do the internal work of readiness. We have to be ready to grow and not just grow because we can, and not just grow for growth's sake. And we need you to tell us the ways in which you want us to grow the most. Help shape our priorities. Remember when we said that one of our strategic initiatives was to measure the effectiveness of our programs? Tell us what we do that you want more of, or less of, or what big ideas you think would change the maker community. We're going to be ready to do more very, very soon, and we want to include your ideas in that story. So we hope that you'll join us. Makers, please share your thoughts. And if you're not already, get in our markets, apply. If you're a new or emerging maker, spring applications close February 20th. Winter applications open on May 15th this year. That's sooner than usual, which means it will close sooner than usual. Funders, please meet with us. Get to know us. Please fund our strategic plan. Boy, I'd love if you'd fund our first full-time staff member who's not Tricia. That'd be great. Volunteers. We always need more volunteers at HA, particularly at our markets. Parking lot attendants, helping with vendor check-in, helping folks with wayfinding and access needs. So if you have a heart for service and you're not sure where else to put yourself, come to an event and help. Finally, shoppers. We exist to connect shoppers with makers. You don't need to come to our markets to support our mission year-round. There are stores right here in Pittsburgh that carry handmade goods. Wildcard, Love Pittsburgh, Songbird Artistry, or you can shop directly at places like Una Biologicals, Commonwealth Press, Hal and Burt, or online. Go to handmadearcade.org, view a list of our past events. We post every single vendor and we link to their page. Go show them some love. All right, thanks for bearing with us. That's all of our blah, blah, blahing for now. Hopefully you have questions and thoughts. Hopefully you've been posting them throughout this. We're gonna take questions from anybody who's in the room or open comment. And anything's fair game, anything at all. So Maher is here, our board secretary, who you can't see, which is a shame, because he's dressed very nicely this evening. He's monitoring the chat. And I also want you to know that if you aren't ready right now to give feedback, or you haven't, brainstormed a huge idea for tonight, that's totally fine. Not everybody thinks great on their feet, and you might want some time to stew on all of this. So we're going to share Tricia's email after this, and then you can write her. So take your time. But if there's anything that we can answer now, or anything that you'd like to say, you are certainly welcome to. I'm going to start in the room, because y'all came down here and it's cold and it was hard to find this door, wasn't it? I couldn't find this door. I knew where it was. You're like, no, it's fine. It's a me problem. Does anybody have any questions who's here with us tonight? Do we have any questions in the chat, Meyer?
We do not.
We do not.
No.
No one has any questions at a town hall.
No.
You're just gonna let us say whatever we want and then go about our evening. Yes.
Talk about growth and opportunities with here at Handmade Arcade. What type of positions are you looking to grow into?
That's a great question. So the question is, we talked about growth and opportunities at Handmade Arcade, and so what kind of positions are we talking about? So, Tricia is the person who is going to talk about the kind of support that she needs. And I think that this is a really great question, because there's a version of a strategic plan where we sit in a room without you and try to envision what our first full-time staff member is. Usually in an organizational life cycle, that would be something like a fundraiser. And while that would be nice in theory, makers aren't going to feel the impact of that right away. And makers need a lot like right now. Not to mention that Tricia is she has so many hats, all of the hats. And so first and foremost, we need to relieve some pressure on her. And that's probably going to be some contracted roles that are to just pick up some work here and there. And for a while, that's been a challenge at Handmade Arcade to figure out how to mindfully add full-time staff, because when you just have a lot of work to do at the end of the year and a lot of work to do at the beginning of the year, and what used to be a lull in the summer, but is no more, it only made sense to throw staff at it at the end of the year, beginning of the year. Part of our story about trying to become a year-round organization is to have more support year-round. So it could be development staff, because that's just wise organization growing. And then that would make it so that the third person could be more maker support. But we need to know what everybody wants us to do. We might need to have somebody full-time on staff who helps coordinate maker curriculum and helps make sure that people get feedback, and helps Tricia meet with over 500 people to apply to the winter event.
Yes.
There's a lot of tending to our community that needs to be done. And I think that sometimes feels, when you're in a place of scarcity and you're starting to grow as an organization, hard to know where to throw the investment first that will make a difference. Do we help the people who are saying, I need so much more, who are the central part of our mission? Or do we tend to the fact that we don't have capacity to grow just yet and have more fundraising acumen? Our plan at the board level is to start throwing contracted staff at Tricia and see what makes the biggest difference for her bandwidth wise, and learn from that, and then invest in a full-time person, so that we don't have full-time staff, invest in them, and then realize we should have done something else. We want to be really mindful about it. That might feel like a nothing answer, because I'm like, I don't know. But that's everything we're talking about at the staff level. Is there anything you want to add? I'm looking at Tricia. It's really weird to be wondering what I'm doing over here. This is Tricia.
I don't have anything to add.
She doesn't have anything to add. Do you have a follow-up? Or do you want to give me a hard time? Because you totally can. What do you think we should do? Me neither.
We have some questions in the chat.
Oh, okay.
You ready?
All right, yeah.
So first question is from Marsha Cruz. They ask, as you grow, would you ever consider doing the spring show at the convention center similar to the holiday show?
The question is, as we grow, this is definitely you. Would we consider doing the spring show at the convention center the way that we do the winter market?
Yes. The answer to that question is yes. Handmade Arcade had a spring show at the convention center in 2011 and it went really well. But that being said, we have to be able to do it. Like, it's really hard to put on a large event by yourself when you're doing all the communication, all the coordination with sponsors, all of that. I think that doing a spring show in a larger capacity makes sense. I don't know when we will do that. I don't know how long down the road that would be. And I also, in an ideal world, and I've thrown this, out into the ethos a few times, but not often enough for maybe my board not to be like, don't say that out loud, but I'm going to do it. I'd like to see a summer event. I'd like to have an outdoor summer market. We did a pop-up summer market downtown with 30 vendors with the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership and the Creative Business Accelerator last summer. We did 2. One was significantly more successful than the other, even though that day was so hot. I think I lost 15 pounds, which was great, but it was so hot. But there was $30,000 in revenue made with only 30 makers just in that day alone. So like, we have this social media following, we have an audience, we have people who want to come to events. We don't have, like Jackie was saying, the staff, the programming staff, is it who we hire to, expand what we do really well, which is put on markets.
I think one of the things too about adding a summer market is that if you think of making as a sort of continuum where maybe our user journey is that at the beginning, somebody watches somebody do something really cool at the winter event and thinks, wow, I could do that. And suddenly they see themselves as a maker. Handmade Arcade wants to be able to have a place for makers at any age or any stage to plug in to making and to be able to make money from that. And so right now we have an entry point at the spring market, and we have the, like, when you have great inventory and you can deal with tens of thousands of people coming past your table. And what we don't have is a sweet middle spot for people who are neither at the beginning of their journey and also aren't ready for the holiday market. And that's an example of a way that we know we could better meet our maker community's needs. And that seems to be leaning more and more toward year-round maker support in our next position.
Next question from Inside the Fox Den. Is it a requirement to apply/participate in the spring market before you can apply/participate in the holiday market?
That's a great question. The question is it required to participate in the spring market before you can come to the holiday market? And the answer is no. Not at all really.
No, it's not only not related, but you can't, you can, a lot of the makers who do the spring market then enter the holiday market on a path that we call craft corridor, which is a smaller table size and a smaller booth fee because they're newer makers, they're like a younger business. So at the holiday market, while it is really large and we want a lot of folks to be there, we are mindful that not everybody's like on the big show scale ready. So we provide an easier path in. So you don't have to do the spring market at all. That we have, I think, at least 80 new makers every year. So if not more. So we really do rotate. It may not seem like we do, but we really do rotate with new makers and old at our holiday event. If I answered the question.
She didn't answer the question. If you don't think she answered the question, ask the question again. Tell us we didn't answer it. Tell us we didn't do good enough. We're here for it.
Next question. How important is photo? This is from Jody Zavora. How important is photo quality to get accepted to Handmade Arcade? I posted photos that show clearly what my products are, but overall they could probably be better.
So that's super important. That is the biggest question that we get, and we do, and it is the hardest thing to do for a maker. It is hard to be, it's hard for you to see the picture you've taken and see it outside of your head because you're so connected to the art that you do. And it is something that I do tell people that if you want to send me pictures before events, before you apply, I'll happily give you advice. But there's so many ways to get good photography. There's so many tutorials online, getting a light box. It's really important that you have clear pictures of your product. And it's also really important to think about the product in terms of, don't like clutter up your picture. Like, yeah, you make a mug and it's really a beautiful mug, but you don't necessarily need to have like a plant or something else, a macrame thing hanging behind it. Like, just make sure you focus on your product itself. Mia has something to say.
Yeah, also in the past, at the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, we have offered a program called Example, and it is something we're looking at bringing back. Where I believe it was $50 to participate, and you got high quality images of your artwork, any of your products. So it is something we're looking to bring back. So please kind of keep following to figure out when that's launched. And there's also small grants out there that exist. We run the Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator Grant, which can be used for that type of thing. So I encourage you to also check out the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council's grant opportunities, because that might help you get not just high quality work samples, but also startup capital for your business. Tap back out.
I'm going to do another quick plug and say that there are service providers in the city who specialize in being able to do this sort of work. And to help relieve barriers, they operate on a sliding scale. One of them is Porter Loves. So they specialize in this kind of product photography. That isn't to say that if you have the best photos in the world, that means you're going to get in. But we're just trying to offer up some resources for how folks can improve their photography, because we get that question a lot.
Allison B asks, I love HA and have participated as a maker and a larger org against Rock, but I'm always curious about the decision to include makers who have brick and mortar stores. It just seems to me that they are on a different footing than independent makers. What are the ideas on that?
So to make sure that we're understanding this question, you perceive that there is an overemphasis on makers who have brick and mortars over makers who do not, when it comes to being included in decision-making at Handmade Arcade. Is that right? If
I
you're-
would not say there's an overemphasis. I'm just simply questioning. I just always find it like I feel that's difficult competition in some ways for independent makers when people have the recognition of, oh, I saw your store last time I was on Walnut Street in Shadyside or in the Strip District, or we don't have that opportunity. That is why we come to Handmade Arcade, is to have that physical space to sell and connect to customers. So I'm not saying it's an overemphasis. I am just questioning it. Has it ever been questioned? Am I the first one to question it? I'm sorry, just curious.
Yeah, no apology needed whatsoever. This is the space to ask questions, and we're happy to be honest about what we do or do not know about those questions. So thank you. This is great. Here are things that I'm hearing. First of all, the fact that I'm the board president and cannot tell you right now of all of those little pink slips that said maker on the advisory committee and on the board, which ones have brick and mortar stores and which don't, is a problem. I should know that. So I'm going to find the answer to that. And one of the things that we'll talk about at the board level is, do we have adequate representation of a mix of folks who have brick and mortar stores and those who don't? So that's one thing that we can do right away. I will say that something that used to bother me about Handmade Arcade is that I felt like I was seeing a lot of the same big makers year over year. And when I joined, I was like, I'm going to change that. And whenever I talked to Tricia, I realized that a lot of the folks who have a lot of visibility on end caps and have brick and mortar stores are sponsors. And that is how we see them year over year. It is how we pay the bills. And for a long time, sponsor money was the only thing that got us from the holiday market one year to the holiday market next year. Again, I'm not at all saying that doesn't mean that we need to hold ourselves accountable and ask this question on a deeper level. But I also want to admit that this is something that I had wondered about for quite some time. But I imagine Tricia has things to say about this too. But I want you to hear that I am absolutely going to do my homework on what the representation of makers with brick and mortar stores versus not is on the advisory committee and on the board.
Nobody on the advisory committee or the board has a brick and mortar store.
Done.
I will say that a lot of them are sponsors, the brick and mortar folks. And there was a conversation years and years ago about this exact thing. When does it become you're a maker and you're a small maker business who is like doing your thing, but you don't have the recognition of a store? And we decided years ago that when we perceived a maker to get to a certain level of success, several stores, a big a big name, a big presence, that we would then approach them and say to them, hey, you're out there killing it. It's unfair for us, you're going to get in if you apply, but it's kind of unfair for the smaller people. Would you come in as a sponsor? And we've been pretty consistent about doing that. So if you have specific questions about specific makers who are, you think who maybe weren't sponsors, who I maybe don't know that have a brick and mortar store that are in the event, that, but we do definitely are aware of that when we do jury, and we do reach out. Una, Jess from Una Biologicals is here in the room with me, and I keep looking at her because she's one of the people I went to, and I said, hey, Jess, we have to talk. We think you need to be a sponsor now. And she was like, you know what, I think I do. And it's always gone really well. So, but that's a really great question. And it's a good one that people do wonder about.
Can I ask you a follow-up?
Sure.
So my question is, is there a question on the application that asks whether or not they have a brick and mortar store? And my follow-up is, are there any controls over the percentage of makers with brick and mortar stores versus not, in terms of a min or max for who we let into the markets?
No, and no.
Well, there's one way we can hold ourselves accountable.
We don't have that question. That's a really great question to ask. And we don't, but we do generally know between all of the people who are on the advisory committee, they're all really connected to the maker community. And then the 5 guest jurors, we make sure are really connected to the maker community. So we generally know, and we take notes. And as we jury folks in, which is like a day-long process, we look at everything all together. We look at those notes, and sometimes in the note will be like, hey, did you know they opened a store here? And so we kind of assess like what we know about them from their storefronts from that.
I want to highlight too that organizationally, this is an example of what I would say is a weakness of having somebody who has been at the organization for 1,000 years, who keeps all of the information in her head, right? So Tricia knows, she just knows a lot of makers. She's been doing this for a very long time. And our advisory committee knows a lot of makers because they see applications from sometimes a rotating group of the same 4 people and then a percentage of new ones. But if that's not institutionalized, if we don't have ways to capture that information outside of just Tricia knowing when she's in the room, then if Tricia wins the lottery, that information can go away. Or when this sort of question is asked, we can't be properly accountable for it outside of being like, hey, Tricia, can you come tell us? And so that's the kind of thing that we're really trying to pay attention to with our strategic plan, because we don't want to grow in a place of perpetuating inequities that we can adjust before we grow. So that we can include everybody or as many people as possible in that. That's us genuinely asking the question to ourselves in the spot, which is what we're here to do. Thanks for being nice to us.
Next question is from Paula. They ask, are there volunteer roles throughout the year that aren't just supporting the day of the event? If so, what needs are there to fill?
Are there volunteer roles outside of the events year-round that volunteers can fill? And we've been thinking a lot about this. And I think there are lots of places where we could apply volunteer help. I think the issue is one of capacity. Managing volunteers is an entire job. And while we could have maybe 1 or 2 volunteers who are with us year-round to do things around the office or to help, Tricia had to schlep here with some drinks and stuff for the in-person event tonight, and that would be really easy to give to a volunteer. It's time spent managing, and if that person can't be a constant, it means that she has to retrain, re-meet, reconnect, and she's already over capacity. I think that when we're talking about staffing and how to staff, we're going to get to the place where some of the things that we need to do right now, we're going to have to ask people to do as a contractor or see what we can do in terms of volunteering while we add that first full-time staff. I know we need help with social media. There are so many of you talking to us. We have so many followers. And if you go on Instagram right now or you go on Facebook, you'll see questions that people have asked that we just haven't been able to answer, especially when there's, maker takeovers. And we have to do all these sponsor shout outs and everything. We want to make sure that everybody is seen. But even just that day-to-day work of keeping up with those. One example is we could have one dedicated volunteer who knows Handmade Arcade very well, who responds to some of those questions on our behalf to help us keep up. If you have ideas for things that you'd like to raise your hand for, not specifically you who asked the question, anybody, and you think that you could be a year-round volunteer and you have an idea of I could do X number of hours a month, or I could do something over the summer, let us know what your skills are. Let us know what you're willing to do. And we would love to know how we can leverage the community that we already have to try to grow. It's a great question.
Next question is from Karen. She says, please clarify makers who are eligible to participate in the spring market transitioning from Etsy. I have been in business for a couple of years, but have not done many vendor shows.
Interesting. Okay, so the question is about folks who are eligible for the spring market. If they are on Etsy or they're very good online, but they've never actually tabled at a market, can they still get into the spring show?
Yes, the answer is yes. The only requirement, we did it when we, this is like really fun for me. I feel like I'm getting to be like my inner Muppet that I've always wanted to be. So when we started the spring show, we did put up a lot of like requirements because we really wanted to like make sure, we really wanted it to be like new makers. But that got really cumbersome and hard to manage as you know, things do. So we kind of scaled that back. And now the spring show, this only requirement is that you are a newish business that who has never tabled at a Handmade Arcade event before. This is your first time. If you've been at the winter market or a past spring event, you can't apply. But if you've never been at a Handmade Arcade market, you can apply. You're eligible, and and it's a really great time. We really encourage makers who've been selling online for a couple of years, who are like kind of nervous about starting an in-person you know, sales avenue, and that's why we do the workshops, because we talk to you about that. We talk to you about that transition and how to sell and how to do an in-person event, because it's not always easy, especially if you are, a lot of artists aren't as like out, you know, going as they might need to be in an in-person event. So we talk about everything that you would need to know to do an in-person event. So yeah. This is like super fun.
Tricia's having a great time, everyone.
Next question is from Becky. I love that the dates for the winter market are known far in advance. As HA potentially adds more events throughout the year, will the dates be known early so they can be bookmarked in calendars as weekends fill up quickly when working as a full-time artist?
Yes, the question is, will we know the dates in advance as we add markets and be able to talk about them in advance? Yes, and there are lots of reasons for this, beyond the fact that it's just a good idea, and Tricia already said yes. We're going to have to do this in order to raise money for the organization in advance for our activities. So we will have to, as a natural part of a funding cycle, say, here's what we're doing next year that we're asking that you'll fund. And to the best of our ability, we're going to need to put dates to it. And we know that in terms of organizational strength and growth, that knowing what you're going to do 18 months to 12 months in advance gives you the best chance for marketing success, the best chance for fundraising success. So this is a necessary part of what we need to do. So it serves makers and it serves us. So yes, yes.
Yeah. The holiday market is always the weekend after Thanksgiving weekend. So even if like this year it's December 1st and 2nd, next year it's going to be like the 6th and the 7th, but it's always that weekend after Thanksgiving weekend. It's the dates are different, but you can kind of count on the calendar that way.
Is the spring market always the same?
The spring market is always the 2nd, or it depends on Construction Junction, and we have narrowed it down to either being the 2nd to last or the last Saturday in April, even if it falls on my birthday, which is in April.
Next question is from Marcia. Who determines who the maker community is and who reaches out to the African American community?
Yeah, this is a great question.
a great
Who
question.
determines who the maker community is? Who reaches out to the African American community? I'm taking that first question. Who determines who the maker community is? I mean, if you tell us you're a maker, you're a maker. Right?
Right.
I mean, if the idea is that Handmade Arcade is supposed to serve makers at all ages and stages, then if you're a hobbyist, you're in the maker community. If you're doing it for your professional hustle, you're in the maker community. I think this is a question about gatekeeping, that first one. Who decides who gets to be a maker? And I think that the part of gatekeeping that we do is who gets to be in markets, right? Because we don't keep people away from curriculum. The only juried events that we have, or the juried things that we do, are deciding who gets into the spring market, who gets into the winter market. We continue to grow the winter market bigger and bigger to try to make more and more room. And we just tackled a question about how we can make the spring market bigger. So there's that. Who reaches out to that? So what year was it? In my in my slides when I talked about how the maker community, some folks had told us that white gatekeeping, 2020 was that year, that white gatekeeping had meant that they had stopped trying to interact with HA because it wasn't successful for them. We did a listening tour, Tricia specifically, who can talk about that experience, to say, great criticism, tell us more. And that's when we started to unpack what is the aesthetic that determines who gets into a market. So if my advisory committee is all white, for example, and they're making decisions about quality and perceiving aesthetic, then that is a white lens. And it's going to leave out people of color because there are not enough people of color who are on the advisory committee. And so we learned a lot from those conversations. And the first thing that we tried to do is change the makeup of our board and our advisory committee to help with the gatekeeping problem. Yes.
So Marcia clarified,
Yeah.
they wrote, no, not a gatekeeper question, just how do you reach out to the makers and how are they identified?
Good answer anyway, though.
Yeah.
But
Like-
yes,
Good answer, even though that wasn't the question.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, so if you've applied to an event in the past, you're tagged as a maker on our email list, first and foremost. So when we send emails out to maker specific, that is how it works. We, we advertise through, we do a lot of digital advertising. So we try to incorporate like different styles and different faces and different people in different maker faces. Last year, we were really mindful about doing some advertising with different folks who, BIPOC faces in our advertising to make sure that we were, like showing ourselves as being, more diverse. We try to get other organizations to share our applications. I often reach out to different Black-led organizations to share applications, and they're always very receptive. The Women of Visions will share, Boom Concepts will share, One Hood Media will share. We try to, and we with the Origins group that we had the conversation about, Handmade Arcade being historically a white-led organization, that taught us a lot, and we make sure that we're constantly in conversation. I mean, I've gotten to know over the years makers really well, and I'm a really open person, and I don't get upset when you criticize me. So maybe I'll cry, but that's only if I'm having a really bad day. But often I want to hear it. I always want to hear it, and I want to know what we can do differently and better. And if there are organizations that we're missing to give our application announcements to, there are other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head that our marketing director makes sure that we send press releases to, that we, that we're making sure we're like getting our application information in front of as many eyes as possible with our very limited budget.
I'm also going to add that in terms of, how we're getting the word out, making sure that it's reaching the right folks. Last year or the year before. So the way that marketing works a lot of times is whoever the audience is that your message is resonating with the most. When you have a limited marketing budget, you try to just target those folks. And so if Handmade Arcade's messaging has been historically very successful with white ladies, then there's going to be a lot of money thrown at white ladies. And right now with Meta, the robot determines a lot of that. So we talked to marketers about that 2 years ago, and for the first time had a dedicated campaign that was not majority white ladies. It was aimed specifically at trying to figure out how we can get our application and our information in front of more people of color. And so I think those are all the ways that we have so far. We would love to hear more ways that we can get more folks involved. That's what I've got. I would love a follow-up. Would love other people who have questions to add on to this question. I'm here for it.
Karen Kennedy asked, have you discussed the possibility of a storefront or gallery type place for members to sell their work year round?
Have we talked about storefront for people to sell their stuff year round? Two things. One, yes. In 2017, whenever I first came to the board, people wanted to have a brick and mortar space for Handmade Arcade. Buildings are expensive. They usually kill nonprofits. I personally hate having buildings on balance sheet. They're a lot to maintain. And thank goodness we didn't have one during the pandemic. The second is that there are lots of people who are in the Pittsburgh community who are already filling this role. Their stores are dedicated to carrying handmade goods. That doesn't mean that someday in the future, this might not be our role, but right now specifically, we offer markets and we offer professional development. And we're really trying to stay in those lanes and stay in those lanes well, because the moment that we start to be a brick and mortar where you can buy lots and lots of local handmade goods, we start stepping in territory that are some of the folks that we're trying to support. And so we're trying to make sure that as a charity, we're being mindful of the landscape that we're in and trying to fill a need that is unmet or not met well, and not putting resources into doubling up on efforts that already exist. Not fair.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just kind of talking, then asking Tricia, if it's
Yeah.
okay.
No.
No store.
We've talked
Shannon-
about it for the past 18 years, on and off, and the answer's always been no.
Shannon Paris asked if she can also respond to Marcia's question as well. So
Shannon
Shannon,
Paris,
go ahead.
board
and
member
unmute.
extraordinaire.
Yes. And then
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon. I am a board member. I am also the director of the 7 Pillars of Sustainable Business Accelerator at Omicello Cares. And through that role, I serve on the board of the Equitable Entrepreneur Ecosystem Alliance, which means that I have good access to the alliance of entrepreneur support organizations that prioritize serving BIPOC entrepreneurs. And I routinely connect my day job with the work that I'm doing on the board of Handmade Arcade. So I just wanted to follow up for Marcia. I should have piped up sooner. I'm sorry. That is one avenue that we have to connect with BIPOC makers and BIPOC entrepreneurs at Handmade Arcade. And I also want to thank you for asking that question. It's something that at the board level we think about and talk about all the time. And if anyone has any ideas or things that we haven't mentioned that we're already doing, we are very receptive to hearing those ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
we do not at this time have any more questions. of
The
Shannon.
question pipeline is clear. We're gonna hold for a moment, see if anybody has questions in the room, comments in the room. Yes.
Is there a place, looking at where, okay, sorry, let me reframe. With the thought that volunteers could give lift if there's, enough administrative support, right? For specific programming, right? So I guess I have 2 parts. One, is there a place that people should contact, or the best process to contact? The best place to put information? And then with the existing programming, and I guess my brain is thinking the Youth Maker program especially, is there space, do you need volunteers for that? And what's the best way for people to participate?
It is at the very end, and I just cycled all the way to the beginning. I'm sorry, everyone. Avert your eyes as I move through the slides that you
There is a
already
place
saw.
for that, Jess.
There is, so the question is, for folks who are not in the room, the question is there a place where volunteers can sign up to help, especially with things like year-round administrative tasks? And I just wanted to bring this slide up before Tricia has a chance to share.
So email me. If you are a social media expert and you're like, I want to volunteer 10 hours a week and I can do stuff for you. Yeah, let's do it. If you want to participate in the Youth Maker Accelerator program and you are passionate about that, before the pandemic, we had a Youth Maker committee, but it all kind of fell apart. We have sort of we put that a little bit back together with a couple of the folks on the advisory committee. So the people, the folks on the advisory committee are basically our volunteers. They are the ones who I go to, like Samantha Bauer, for example. Every year for every event, she puts all of our events on all of the event calendars for me. So they do some of that work. So that work, and then some years, some folks can do more than others based on their work and their family lives. But if you're specifically interested in being a part of the Youth Maker Committee, I would love that. We need to bring that back this year. And we also, the Youth Maker programming it's tricky because we don't always know if it's going to get funded. But last year, we were able to get funding for 2 years from the Grable Foundation. So we know for a fact this year it will be funded, which is really, really, really amazing to have happen. And we also always have mentors for the youth makers, which we connect to local makers. So if you're interested, if you're a maker, we try to make sure that the mentor is going to be a participant of the Handmade Arcade Holiday Market. So we try not to pair them up until we know who's going to be in the market, simply because it's really helpful to have that maker on site if the youth maker has a question, and we try to place the mentors really close to the youth makers on the floor.
So if you want to volunteer, email Tricia. And also, we should have a form for this probably.
We do. It's just not.
We're gonna dig that up.
Meg just had a comment. If you're looking for brick and mortar shops that support local makers, try Love Pittsburgh, Wildcard Workshop, the shop at XCC, Towel and Bert, Cord and Iron, the shop at PCA, PG&H, and many more that I am forgetting. So thank you, Meg, for that.
Yeah, check that chat out. Shop at those places. Amplify those places.
We should put a page on our website that is places to shop local throughout the year.
Yep.
Someone emailed me.
Trisha's just saying that we could, I'm keeping notes. Trisha just said that, in addition to listing all the folks who have tabled at events so that you can shop from them directly, we should make it easier to get information about where you can find a local handmade good any day of the week, and which shops carry those. So thank you for that. It is about 7:45. I love when a meeting ends early. That said, I'm here till 8 if you want to talk about Handmade Arcade until 8 o'clock. Our
Margaret,
pipeline is clear,
who
yeah?
suggested that? Was it Matt? Matt?
Meg Kroll.
Okay, okay.
Anyone else? No?
That's
Oh,
another
I
chat.
want to say one thing about that.
I do think that it's a great idea for us to put a page on the website that where folks can go and shop local stores. But that I want to say publicly that if we create that page and we leave somebody off, it's not purposeful. Just email me and say, hey, you left off, you forgot the Union Project sells ceramics in their shop. Silly, put them on, because I would hate to, I'm just saying that because there's representatives from the Union Project here tonight. So I would hate for someone to think that that was purposeful. There would never be a purposeful exclusion. So if we did create that page and we missed somebody, just shoot me an email. That's never a problem.
Also a great note in general, if you feel like somebody is being excluded or you feel like you yourself are being excluded, will you please tell us? So we can stop.
One more question from Marcia. Do you intend to host another town meeting?
That's a great question. We didn't know how this would go. We would love to know how you think this went. So if you're in the chat, you're still with us. Before you go, if you could let us know if this was helpful or if there's something you wish we would have talked about or something that we would have done that we didn't. We did this in part because we held ourselves publicly accountable, but on Instagram, because that's where the action was going down in 2020. During the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement, to say, hey, here's how we are addressing some of the issues at our organization, being that we're historically white-led. And then we continue to just follow up on Instagram every year. And we realized last year, that's not the way to go. And so we thought we would try this and wondered if this could be some version of an annual report that makes sense, that isn't just something that sits on a shelf. We don't want to do that unless people are interested in it. And so if that is something you'd like us to do, to come back every year and say, hey, this is what we're working on, here's our progress compared to what we said we would do last year, and keep you in the conversation, please let us know. As you know, as we presented from this, we have a limited bandwidth over all, so we're trying to be really mindful about what we're putting our time and attention toward. If this is valuable, then tell us and we'll do it again. And if you wish it looked different, then tell us that, we'll change it.
Two comments. Meg said again, my list was not all inclusive. I've bought some lovely ceramics from the Union Project. Shannon Paris said, maybe we can ask our past event participants where their wares are sold.
Yeah.
Great.
Let's see. Debbie from Software Artistry Good Town Hall. You guys do a great job, and I think this was a great idea. Marcia said again, I think you should do it every 6 months, possibly.
We can do a summer market or a town hall, you choose. Unless you're a funder listening, in which case you can make it all possible.
I
at the
mean, I
same
think
time.
that if
by
they
giving us
want to
staff.
know that, like, if they want to know more specific things about Handmade Arcade, like the process, like if they wanted to have an event, like while the applications were open, that's something that I have done and I do and I would do. I do have virtual meetings where we talk about how to get in and what and things like that. So if that is something that folks would want, I would happily do a Zoom this summer about, like event specific.
Yeah, great. So some of the questions that were asked tonight were event specific and market specific, and that's great. It was a really ask me anything kind of format. But we could tend to those sorts of questions on an ongoing basis more regularly. What we're doing at the organizational level, frankly, organizational growth is slow. And so we can figure out what makes sense to report out about in 6 months. But the reality is we're probably going to be putting in our first applications for funding for some of the things that we're talking about tonight within the next 6 months. And so we won't be able to come back and say whether or not we were or were not successful in that. And we'll only have one market that will have happened within 6 months. So heard, and we will think about what makes sense to do. But in the meantime, we can definitely continue to do informational sessions to make sure that folks who have never tabled with us before or applied to a market can get questions answered about things like photography and whether or not they are even eligible.
Just a couple of additional comments. Jody and Sarah Castro said this was great. Made them aware of other workshops and their focus starting the business. Karen said she enjoyed the town hall as well. And Shannon Paris said, if you'd like assistance navigating resources for entrepreneurs, to email her at, and I don't know how to pronounce her.
Oh, Michelle Harris.
Yes,
Yes.
to email her at that email address.
Cool. All right, we're gonna start the business of wrapping up. Again, if you have a question, a comment, a bigger thought, please email Tricia and let her know. This is not the only time that we want to hear from you. We would love to hear from you year round. And if you have skills and you want to volunteer them to our mission and you have an idea of about how many hours you could do in a month, let us know. Email Tricia, let her know you want to get involved. In the meantime, the board is going to start doing some more work about asking questions like putting on the application for markets, things like, do you have a brick and mortar store or not? And figuring out how those sorts of things are regulated. We're going to start putting together our asks for funders. The first ask is, will you get in a room with us and talk? And so if you are listening to this, I'm talking to you, I'm going to be in your inbox soon. And if you heard about any of the initiatives that we're doing and you have access in your network to a resource that you think would help us, or if there's something that you want us to know about ourselves, we would love for you to tell us. Again, email Tricia at handmadearcade.org. Good night. Thank you. Bye. We really appreciate you. Just like crowding the screen. And remember, Tricia is the executive director. I'm just the president, just visiting.
Not just the best.
Thank you all and good night.
Thanks, everyone. Stop the recording now.